All right, everybody. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you so much for joining us in the last in our series of Lunch and Learn sessions to provide awareness of domestic violence. Before we get started, I want to remind everyone that the session will be recorded. In the next couple of weeks, I'll send out information on how to access the recording. It will be on the department's YouTube page, so you'll be able to find it there. So you don't have to take screenshots. You don't have to remember email addresses and things like that, because you'll be able to access those slides through the recording. Um, and for those of you who need closed captioning, you can access that through the More tab on the far right at the bottom of the screen. Click it and the three dots. It should open up options so that closed captions will activate. For consideration of all here, please mute yourself so that we don't have background sound competing with our speakers. We will be asking you, of course, to complete a short survey at the end of the session. It should pop up at the end of the session when you close the meeting, depending on how your pop-ups are set on your device. I will send the link again for the survey with the recording information in case you have issue getting the link or getting it to pop up. Sometimes devices don't automatically populate the survey, but it is an important tool for us to evaluate and improve future trainings. Do we have any additional questions from anybody? You can pose those in the chat before we get a little bit further on and get more started. Now, in the department, when we start meetings or we start trainings, we do a check-in, and it might help us focus on what we're going to talk about. But in this case, let's focus on who's in the room, because these opportunities have been across the state, across the country, and we've had people from as far away as Alaska, New York, California. So in the chat, if you would let us know your name, your location, city, town, area of the state, what country you might be from. Are you a service provider or are you seeking services? Because that will help us know who is here, who is present, and get us going. And we are getting a lot of victim witness directors from across the state are coming. And we do have some folks from Richmond in the room, including our presenters today. We've got Madison County, Virginia. We've got Linda Roth from Oklahoma. I think you might be the farthest one away today. Antonina is back from Grayson County. I think she gets the award for coming to every single session. Rockbridge is in the house. All right. Lots of great folks are here today. We've got DJJ in the house. And we've got probation and parole from Richmond in the house. Welcome, everybody. And while everybody's filling in the chat, I would like to introduce my staff that is in the room. And since I see her on my screen, I will start with Beth.
Thanks, Deidre. Good afternoon, everybody. I am with the Department of Corrections Victim Services Unit. I'm the regional advocate in Southwest Virginia. It's great to see so many people here.
Definitely. And I'll pass it to Miss Emily.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm the Victim Services Manager for DOC. We're really excited to have all of you here today, and thank you so much to our speaker. This has been such a great series this month to learn about the great things that we have going on across the state and across the nation for some of them. So thank you all for being here.
All right, and I think that is all of my staff that is here, the great folks in my unit. I could not work with a better team. I'm also going to stop sharing my screen for just a moment so Miss Tyler can go ahead and get her PowerPoint up and get it going. And Tyler is with us here from Safe Harbor. And Safe Harbor is an amazing organization that does a whole lot of things. And I would say Richmond metro area. But just like a lot of the other organizations that we have had share this week, we in this month, we have folks like Tyler who work for organizations that do a whole lot more than just stuff in Richmond, that they share resources from across the country. They will hook you up with those folks that can help you in different areas. With that said, I see her PowerPoint is up. The slide looks great. I am going to hand it over to Tyler.
Thank you so much for that introduction, Dee. I appreciate it. So my name is Tyler. I am the Outreach and Prevention Coordinator with Safe Harbor. And we provide support and services for survivors of sexual and domestic violence and human trafficking. We primarily service in Rico County here in Richmond, but we also have community partners that we work with, and we service survivors of human trafficking all across the state. So our mission, like I said, is to provide support and services that survivors need to overcome their crisis and transform their lives. So today is basically going to be an overview of what domestic violence looks like, how you can spot it. I'm going to go over some national and local statistics, as well as going over maybe how to talk to a survivor, or if you suspect domestic violence, things that you can say, things that you can do to support those people and also your community. Some of the information is going to be a little on the heavy side, as I'm sure for people that have been coming to these lunch and learns throughout the month. So I just want to remind everybody about self-care. If you see yourself kind of getting out of that comfort zone, and we do want to challenge ourselves. We want to be open-minded. When we get to that challenge portion, that's when our brain kind of rewires. That's where we learn things, and that's great. But if you notice yourself starting to get maybe flooded, overwhelmed, that's okay. Maybe if you've got a fidget toy on your desk, I usually like to keep one near me. Those are great. Drink water if you need to step away or zone out on your phone. That is all okay. Please take care of yourself. So the services that we offer. So we have emergency and transitional housing for sexual and domestic violence survivors, as well as human trafficking survivors. We have court advocates in the Enrico Juvenile and Domestic Relations Court. So anybody seeking a protective order that comes in, we offer them support, services, resources. We can walk them through the process. We can be there in the courtroom with them if they want. We have a comprehensive human trafficking program. It was the first one in Central Virginia. And that includes emergency and transitional housing, as well as counseling, support groups, and case management. The counseling that we offer is for adults that have experienced domestic sexual violence or human trafficking, youth ages 13 to 18 that have experienced sexual assault, dating violence, or human trafficking, and also for youth 5 to 12 that have witnessed any sort of domestic violence involving a parent or guardian. We also offer hospital accompaniment, specifically at Bon Secours St. Mary's Hospital here in Richmond. So anybody that walks into the emergency room in any sort of sexual assault, domestic violence, or human trafficking situation, they call us. We send an advocate to literally and metaphorically hold their hand if they want us there. We can help them, talk to police. We can help them go through a perk exam if they choose to do that, and to also give them resources. And then we also have our outreach and education, which is what I do. I get a chance to go out into the community and talk to people and educate people about domestic violence and human trafficking and how we can be a supportive community for those survivors. So, what is domestic violence? Big overarching theme. It is a pattern of abusive behaviors where one partner is exerting control and power over the other one. And this is somebody that they're in a relationship with, dating, married to, living with. And this can occur at home. This can occur in the workplace. It is a significant public health crisis that impacts millions of people every day. It doesn't discriminate. So anyone of any race, age, sexual orientation, religion, religious background, or gender identity can be a victim or a perpetrator of domestic violence. And it can happen to people of all socioeconomic backgrounds or education levels. I will say, while domestic violence can affect everyone, members of marginalized communities are more likely to experience violence more often at a higher rate in their lifetime and are less likely to report and speak up. The communities that I'm talking about are people of color, Indigenous peoples, members of the LGBTQIA plus community, folks living below the poverty line or experiencing homelessness, those that have been system involved, people that are living with physical or mental disabilities, and the elderly as well. Abusers are very smart. They know how to manipulate people easily, and they will choose people that have vulnerabilities that they can exploit. And this shows up in a lot of different ways. So we have our physical abuse and intimidation. It's often the most recognizable. It can leave a mark. But that also includes things like threats of violence, destroying your property, interfering with you while you're driving, hurting your pets, displaying or talking about weapons as well as another form of physical abuse. And then we have our emotional, verbal, and psychological abuse. Not always as obvious. This is usually how things start, is with this type of manipulation. So demeaning you, gaslighting you, insulting you, controlling, trying to control you, telling you who you can and can't be friends with, love bombing you, so making grand gestures to kind of make you think that, you know, this is the one person for you, and nobody else is going to treat you like this, and they're the ones that love you the most. Financial abuse, and this is something that we see in 99% of domestic violence situations that we see. And this can be things like not allowing you to get a job if you want one, or demanding that you give all your money to your partner, employment or educational sabotage, not giving you access to joint funds, or not even allowing you to have a personal banking account. And yeah, this occurs in almost every case that we see. Isolation is another one. So basically cutting you off from your support system. So, well, maybe wanting to live together early on in relationships so that they put space in between you and your friends and family, or convincing you that your friends and family just don't understand your relationship. So they're trying to put space in between you and your support system so that they're the only person in your orbit. Stalking is another one. So showing up at your job, at your school, at your home, constantly calling or texting you, sending unwanted gifts, tracking your location through social media is another big one. I share my location with a lot of my friends. I know many of us probably share our locations with a lot of other people. Or when we post on social media, we tag our location. And that is another way that an intimate partner, a current or former intimate partner, can track your location. Sexual and reproductive abuse. So forcing or coercing you to engage in any kind of sexual activity. Interfering with birth control. So attempting to get somebody pregnant without their knowledge. Also threatening to out somebody that's a member of the queer community is another form of sexual abuse. Digital abuse is another big one. This also occurs in 99% of the cases that we see, and I could probably spend the entire hour just talking about that. But on the basics, it's demanding that you share your passwords, saying who you can and can't be friends with online, trying to control your online content, using social media to keep tabs on you, like we were saying with stalking, sending or requesting unwanted photos, threatening to share explicit photos, revenge porn, looking through your phone, constantly texting you or making you feel like you can't be away from your phone are all forms of digital abuse, or a larger umbrella term is image-based sexual abuse as well. And these things all create barriers to leaving for a survivor. Isolation might make someone feel like they won't have support if they do try to leave. Financial abuse, maybe they don't have the funds to start a new life, or maybe they were forced to sign false tax documents, or maybe they were forced to open a credit card in their name that they don't have access to. And these kinds of things can impact someone for years, and can impact their financial stability. Intimidation is another one. Maybe they believe that their abuser will harm them or their kids or their pets if they try to leave. If children are involved, they might think that having a two-parent household is what's best. Or they're actually thankful. Maybe they're thankful that even though there is abuse, their partner spent time and money helping them raise their kids, and they don't want to take those kids away from that person. If they have a disability or mobility issues, they can't physically leave. Maybe they're elderly and they depend on their abuser to survive or to perform basic tasks. Culture and community is another big one too. So the reason maybe people of color or Indigenous folks might not report is because they feel like they might be criminalized or discriminated against if they try to report. Virginia does have a mandated arrest policy in DV situations with probable cause. So they might fear that they're going to get arrested if they report. Members of the queer community might fear being outed or losing their job or their support system if they choose to report. POs often require revealing sexual orientation and gender identity. Sometimes if you're admitting that you are living with an intimate partner, you have to talk about that in court, and maybe they're not out to their friends and family. So that can be scary. And a lot of these things are also intersectional. So multiple types of abuse can happen at the same time, and they often escalate. So physical violence rarely happens early on in a relationship. It builds. Emotional abuse lays the groundwork so that if physical abuse does happen, the survivor might not have the psychological capacity to either recognize the abuse or have the capacity to leave because of other barriers. So a couple of statistics. 1 in 3 women and 1 in 4 men in the US have experienced some form of physical violence by an intimate partner. 1 in 2 14 to 24-year-olds have experienced some form of dating abuse. Yeah, that's about 20 people every minute, give or take. And honestly, these numbers are probably low because a lot of times people just don't report. Men especially don't report. So these numbers are probably low. On a single day in 2020, domestic violence hotlines received about 22,000 calls in one day, which is almost 15 calls every minute. In Virginia specifically, 33.6 of women and 28.6 of men experience intimate partner violence, physical violence, intimate partner rape, or stalking in their lifetimes. Virginia police estimate that there are about 32,000 active protective orders on file in the state at any given time. In the workplace, so domestic violence doesn't just affect us at home. It has a profound impact on our employment, regardless of where it occurs. And the impacts, so we're talking about physical injury, psychological trauma, employment sabotage. They shape how we show up to work. They shape how survivors show up to work. Nearly 9 in 10 survivors of domestic or dating violence report some sort of employment sabotage or disruption to their ability to work. About 60% of those people report actually losing their job because of it. So yeah, not being able to maybe get further education to move up. People, they'll lose promotions because their partner maybe won't let them work the extra hours, or maybe they have just a part-time job and they want to go full-time, but their partner won't allow them to do that. So it affects us not just at home, but also at work. The good things to expect in a healthy relationship. These are the green flags. To always be treated with respect and as an equal, to not be hurt emotionally or physically, to always be safe in your relationship, to always feel safe in your relationship, to be able to say no to sex or affection at any time, to have friends and activities apart from your partner. It's really healthy to spend time away from your partner, and to have alone time, or to have time to spend with your friends or your family or other hobbies. I kind of look at it as a solar system. Like, we can't just, your partner is not your sun. It's just one planet in the solar system. You're the sun. You should always be able to end a relationship safely. Nobody should ever feel afraid of breaking up with somebody or ending a relationship. You should also be able to talk about and have healthy personal, physical, and emotional boundaries. And you should talk about consent, and you should be able to give that consent, and withdraw it as you see fit. One yes is not a universal yes. Just because you've said yes in the past doesn't mean that it's yes forever. And I think this is especially important for teens and young adults who are forming relationships now, because that's setting the stage for their future relationships. And respect is important in all relationships. So relationships with family, with friends, with coworkers, and particularly and with intimate partners as well, which is why I'm so excited to see everyone here. I think that the fact that we are engaging in these conversations, we can help the next generation build healthy, nonviolent relationships, by teaching them that, we can teach them early and often about the importance of boundaries and consent and communication as well. So some signs to look for if you suspect maybe domestic violence, or if these things that you haven't noticed before. So some physical signs, so unexplained injuries or bruising, changes in appearance, and this could be makeup, clothing. Maybe it's somebody that put a lot of time and effort into their appearance before, and now it's the opposite, or vice versa. Maybe they didn't put any time or effort into, making sure their hair and makeup was perfect before, but now they do. So it's dramatic changes like that that warrant a check-in, like something like, hey, like I've noticed this. Is everything okay? What's going on? Some emotional signs. So if their self-esteem is all of a sudden very low, or they don't think much of themselves, if they're overly apologetic or meek, or seem fearful, if they're more anxious or on edge, they have a loss of interest and hobbies. Erratic mood swings is another one as well. And also things like excessive lateness. If they're normally a person that's always on time and they're all of a sudden always late to something, that could be a red flag. If they're canceling appointments or meetings at the last minute, frequent use of sick time, if they would normally share a lot about their personal life with their family and all of a sudden that's changed and they don't, they have more privacy concerning their personal life. If there are disruptive calls or personal visits that you've noticed. And yeah, general lack of productivity. If there was somebody that always got the job done and all of a sudden that's, their productivity is lower, that could also be a sign that they might be experiencing some sort of abuse in the home. So how to talk to somebody. As I said before, domestic violence is a public health crisis, and it's not a private matter. describing domestic violence as a private matter minimizes it, and then presents this image that we're condoning and permitting it as well. So yes, respect people's privacy, but it's not gossip, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And we should be having these conversations and we should be talking about it because it affects all of us and it affects our entire community. So when you do want to talk to somebody, if you do suspect, the big ones to remember, and if you only remember these three, then you're doing great, is believe, listen, and validate. Those are the big ones. So believe them, say, thank you for telling me about your experience. I understand how hard this is for you. Thank you for taking the time to confide in me. Listen actively. Avoid making judgments, giving advice. Try to give those proactive statements. Say that you can support them however they feel that they want to be supported. And validate their feelings. Whatever emotions they describe, let them know that that's normal. It's a normal reaction to trauma. And remind them that they can feel however they want to feel, and that's okay. And if they don't want to talk about it, that is okay. Again, letting them know that whatever they want to do is up to them, because their control has probably been taken away from them. They probably don't have control over their life, and letting them know that it is up to them if and when they want to seek help can be really important. Try to avoid the victim blaming. Again, respond with compassion. Remind them that what happened to them, what is happening to them, isn't their fault. No matter what anybody else has said, try to avoid the why questions. Victims of abuse are never responsible for the violence that happens to them. Avoid also trying to bash the abuser. So try to focus on the behavior and not the personality. If somebody is unsuccessful in leaving a relationship and they know that maybe you've spoken badly about their partner in the past, they might not come back to you for help. And they might not use you as part of their support system. So try to focus on the behavior and not the personality of the abuser. And also take their fear seriously. Try not to underestimate the danger that they might be in. A lot of the things that we see survivors doing a lot of the times are survival tactics. So if you see somebody that's maybe going through an abusive situation and they're still, talking to their abuser, they're still saying, I love you at the end of a conversation, they're still spending time with them, that can be a survival tactic. Love is a totally normal emotion. And when you've built a life with somebody, even if abuse is present, those feelings don't just go away, and that's entirely normal. A couple of the things is conditional support. So try not to give conditional support again. So saying like, well, if you leave that person, then I'll help you. So things like that, try to avoid, and promising to help things that you can't deliver. So if you tell somebody that they can stay with you, make sure that you can actually offer them a place to stay. And there's also a big caveat for all of these things. So all of this is what's within your capacity. So don't say, hey, I can be there for you, or I'm here to listen if you do not have the physical or emotional capacity to do so. And that is okay. If you can do one thing and just be like, here's a list of resources, that's great. So anything in your capacity is good. A big part of taking care of people and of being supportive for people that are going through this is taking care of yourself first. It's the oxygen mask in the airplane. You got to put it on yourself first before you help anybody else. Because if we don't have the emotional and mental capacity, then we're not going to be an effective supporter. So please take care of yourself and whatever is within your capacity. Trust yourself. Pressuring is also something to try to avoid. Forcing someone to talk or seek help. Sometimes they won't end up wanting to do that because maybe they're not ready. It's 100% somebody's choice whether they want to get help or not. And a big part of helping somebody in an abusive situation is giving them back their agency. Safety planning is another thing that we can do. Like I said, giving them resources or giving them access to a safety plan can be extremely helpful. So safety planning is important, not just if somebody is ready to leave, but giving somebody a mental plan to be able to kind of work out what it would look like if they did try to leave can help somebody um, to maybe start thinking about, okay, well, maybe this is possible. Leaving is the most dangerous time for somebody in an abusive situation, and a safety plan minimizes that risk for family, for yourself, kids, pets, everything else. So this goes through emotional, physical, financial, and tech safety planning. This is a really good resource, the National Domestic Violence Hotline. Um, they're also a great resource all around. But yeah, they'll help you plan things out like what documents should I have copies of? Who can I leave those documents with? IDs, immigration records, healthcare records, records for your kids. Where can I leave a little bit of money? Where can I leave a go bag? Can I have a bag like put together with the essentials? Um, can I leave some of my medication with somebody so I have access to that when I really need it? So yeah, safety planning can be extremely important and can really help somebody visualize a way out. So even if your way to help is just saying, hey, I will sit down and we'll do a safety plan together, that could be extremely helpful. So just a couple final thoughts. Um, a lot of our natural impulses, and a lot of impulses for people that I work with in this field. I mean, we want to help people, and I think that there is this natural instinct to want to save everyone. Um, and while that's great, and people that want to be able to provide support and help survivors, it's a wonderful thing to do, but it is all about agency. So wanting to save somebody, wanting to maybe force somebody to get help or leave a situation isn't going to work. It needs to be their choice. Otherwise, it won't be successful. It takes, on average, 7 times for somebody to successfully leave an abusive situation. And that's the average. So it could be less. So it could be 4 or 5 times, or it could be 10 times. It could be 12 times. So it has to be their choice and they have to be ready. And if you can't save them this time, then that's okay. Being supportive and offering help when you can, if it's within your capacity, maybe they'll be ready the next time and maybe they'll come to you for help then. So just remembering that it's about them and it's their choice and it's their decision. I do have some resources, and like Dee said, this is going to be that it's all recorded, so you'll have access to these as well. So this is for Central Virginia. So Safe Harbor, like I said, we primarily serve in Henrico County, but we do service human trafficking survivors, so all of Central Virginia. But it is regional based, so these are going to be your Central Virginia resources. And then if you are not in the Central Virginia area, again, the National Domestic Violence Hotline has a great resource to be able to you go in, you can plug in your locality, zip code, what your needs are, and they will direct you to a local agency that can help you where you are. I think that's it. Dee, do we want to open it up to any questions?
I do. I want to open it up to questions, of course, and you can put them in the chat or you can unmute yourself and ask the questions. And I had a question based on where you were talking about it was, it's an epidemic in our country, the CDC, it's a public health crisis. And there was a point that says 70% of workplaces don't have a workplace violence policy. That to me is frightening.
It
But
is.
on the flip side of that, 30% do. So what is that? What what does a workplace violence policy look like? I mean, how do how do agencies put that in place? And what would something like that takes account employees that may be working together? What does it look like?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. Yeah, it is a state by state thing. So Virginia specifically does not require employers to provide either domestic violence trainings like this or require them to have a policy on domestic violence. Some states do. There is actually going to be a provision on the ballot in January that will require employers with more than 50 employees to require trainings like this, which is great. And I hope that that happens. Um, but a policy can really, the basics of what it looks like is making sure that your team knows that if somebody is experiencing domestic violence or an abusive situation, they know who they can go to. They know who that they can go to, and they know that they're not going to be there isn't going to be any retaliation. They're not going to be fired. So saying like, if you need this kind of leave, this is what we can provide. These are your rights. A lot of states also don't require employers to give leave for people that are in domestic violence situations. So having a policy where you can say, this is what is available to you. And if this happens, these are the steps we're going to take. So let's say that a situation happens in the workplace. Or even if it doesn't happen in the workplace, maybe you're getting calls, or maybe somebody is, an abuser's waiting in the parking lot for you. Um, Having a policy set up where it's like, okay, do you have a protective order that we can have on file? Do we need to notify HR and security? Would you like escorts from security to your car? So having a plan laid out um, where you can say, okay, if I'm in this situation, I can go to my boss and they're going to listen to me and they're not going to ignore it. There is a really great resource that I will put. I'm going to stop sharing for a second, but I do have a really great resource that I can put in the chat specifically for how to develop a workplace policy on domestic violence and other resources for workers as well. So I will pop that in the chat momentarily.
That would be awesome. Definitely awesome. And I know, I mean, I've been working for decades now, and it seems like every place that I have ever worked, we have, as employees, encountered someone that was having issues. And statistically speaking, that's about right. If you work anywhere that has more than a dozen people, 1 in 3 women and 1 in 4 men are experiencing something. And no, it's gonna carry over, even if an incident didn't happen at your workplace. It happened at home. Well, now you've got to go to court, or you've got to go here, or now there's a custody issue that you need to go to court for. And employers aren't always supportive of those processes. And how can we be better supportive for our employees so that they continue to work for us?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and like I said, 70% is the statistic for companies that don't have a policy, but I have given plenty of presentations and talked to plenty of people that even though it's not required, they do have a policy. So people do care, we do see it, but it's unfortunately not required in this state. So we still have some work to do.
And what other questions might we have from things that she has shared today? Do we have any services for victims if they need it? Example, housing.
So Safe Harbor specifically, we do offer emergency and transitional housing. And this is for survivors of either sexual or domestic violence or human trafficking. So basically how that looks is that somebody will call, you can call the regional hotline or you can call Safe Harbor directly, and we will do a safety plan and intake for you. And then we will figure out what the immediate need is for shelter. If our shelters are full, we do have relationships with hotels in the area, so we can temporarily put somebody in a hotel if we don't have space in our shelters. Um, the resource for the National Domestic Violence Hotline to find your local resource. When you go onto that webpage, under the form for looking for resources, there is an option to select housing. So it will pull up only agencies within your radius that offer emergency shelter.
Awesome. Now, have you all worked with folks that um need to be kept confidential, like through the OAG's confidentiality program, so that, you know, their safety is secure, their paperwork?
All of our services are completely confidential, and you do not have to be a legal citizen. You don't have to have left your abuser. Doesn't matter when the abuse happened. Could have been 3 days ago, could have been 30 years ago. We will still give you services. Somebody else put in the chat, people with language barriers. So all of our services are offered in English and in Spanish, but we also have a community partner that provides language translation. We have options to get translators for pretty much every language. And if you call the EmpowerNet, which is the Central Virginia hotline, as well as all of the national hotlines, there's availability for all languages to be able to seek services.
Housing, how long can people stay in your housing? I mean, what emergency, is there a time frame? Transitional, is there a time frame? Because different agencies are different.
It is definitely case by case. We sometimes will have people in emergency housing that are only there with us for a few days. Sometimes they're there for 3 months. Usually around the 5 to 6 month mark is when if they're not ready by then, we try to find other options for them or try to move a little bit harder with more counseling. We do offer 12 free sessions for anybody that's staying in the emergency or transitional housing, and all of it's free of charge. But yeah, usually at the 6 month mark is when we start to try to transition people out. But it is case by case. Sometimes it's a little bit longer, sometimes it's shorter. That is just for our sexual and domestic violence emergency shelter. Our human trafficking shelter is a much longer program. So we have people that have been in our human trafficking program for multiple years. And the reason for that being is because a lot of the time, if we see these people coming in that have been trafficked, maybe they've never had a bank account, maybe they've never had an ID, they've never actually held a job, where maybe they've had to, fill out actual paperwork. So it's not just getting somebody shelter, it's not just getting somebody counseling, it's also teaching them life skills, literacy classes. And a lot of those people also maybe have substance use or addiction issues. So getting them addiction counseling as well is a big part of that.
And what other questions do we have in the chat? I don't see anything else in the chat.
Well, if anything pops up, you're welcome to, I'll put my email as well as our website information in the chat. And if any questions pop up, everybody's welcome to send me an email.
The one other question I have for you is, we learned from Red Rover that statistically speaking, 97% of folks surveyed said their pets, their fur babies, had some relevance in their decision of whether to leave or not. Do you guys have capability to help with the pet situation if somebody wants to come into shelter and they have a pet?
So we we make exceptions for service animals. We don't allow pets in the shelter unless it's a service animal, but we do have a couple community partners that we work with that can take pets for short periods of time or longer periods of time for survivors as well. So we do have community partners that we work with for that because that is a huge thing, and that is another barrier why sometimes people don't leave is they don't want to leave their pets, but they don't maybe have the financial ability or capacity to take them with them. So that is a big barrier, 100%.
Well, all righty. If nobody has any other questions, I am going to share our little last pop on the screen to make sure that you have how to contact us if you need anything. All right, so that is back as well. Those QR codes will show up, of course, in the recording. Our email and phone number for our office. So if you want to talk to anyone on our team, we appreciate everyone so much for coming today and joining us to learn about Safe Harbor and learn a lot about how we can care for our friends and loved ones and coworkers that might be struggling through something, or care for ourselves, our family members, in light of this epidemic of domestic and intimate partner violence, sexual assault, and human trafficking as well. And sneak peek, keep in the loop for what might be happening in January for Human Trafficking Awareness Month. I think we need to have another partnership with Tyler and her team to talk more in depth about that.
That would be great. I'd be happy to come back.
All right. Well, is there anything else in the chat? We've got some links and stuff in the chat, lots of thank yous. Thank you so much, everyone, for coming today. And with that, we will bid you adieu and give you a few minutes left back from your lunch.